Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the show. And as you can tell, today we are joined by a very special guest indeed. Um, this guest we have today, you scroll through the IMDb page and you will just find pages upon pages upon pages of credits. Some of the best ones for me personally was Blood Feast in 2016, Wrong Turn 6 as well, and there's so many more to up and coming. I would label you actually as a scream queen because you've been in so many horror movies. So today we are joined by Sadie Katz. Sadie, how are you today?
Thank you for having me. I am great. I'm in LA and supposedly we're having the storm of the century, but we're all surviving here.
Oh, really? I haven't heard about this. So is everything like okay there?
Yeah, I mean, much like all our news is so sensationalized. So we're good. We're surviving.
Oh, that's all that matters. That's the main thing. Um, Again, Sadie, I know some guests don't kind of like to be categorized as a scream queen, so I hope you're kind of okay with that. Um,
You know what's really funny is I think it's weird when I started this, not to show my age, but like 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, if you said Scream Queen, it was like sort of derogatory. And I think horror films, sorry, I have a little chihuahua that's trying to upstage me, per usual. Um, but I think like wasn't it true like 20 years ago, horror films were not in the mainstream? Like you had your horror movie actors, and like going direct to video was sort of like looked down upon. And now that's like a lot of you'll see like A-list actors movies that you're like, I never even heard that, and it comes out. And pretty much everybody's doing horror, like they kind of got savvy. So I think when it started, it was like you want more credit than just being a chick, like with their titties out screaming in the wood. Look at this. She should be out screaming in the and
Oh,
but now I feel like Scream Queen is like, hey, I it's a nice way to say a genre film actor. You don't want to be stuck in anything, but it's not the worst.
yeah. No, it's funny when you mention that. So I've had the honor of being able to interview some women that have been in some huge blockbuster horror movies, certainly in the 80s. And a lot of them kind of did it as they wanted to get into the industry and they kind of begrudgingly got into it. And then further down the years, they really embraced it and embraced being like labeled as a scream queen. But back then it was very much you go into it as a last resort. Whereas as you said, now you have people that are desperate to get into a horror movie and it's their goal to get into just a really gritty horror movie. So it's really interesting how it's changed.
You're so right about it. There are like there's actresses I'll meet who will say, I want to be a scream queen. And that you're right, was like not the deal. I mean, one of the things that I think isn't talked about enough is like horror movies have more parts for women to be empowered than any other genre out there. And there's so many, as much as like horror films are about women being tortured and everything, there are also a lot of leads. They're normally, the final girl at the end. Uh, they overcome crazy obstacles. So it's really now I think of all the opportunities you have to play these nuanced characters that are more than just the girlfriend, which,
Mm.
action films tend to be like just the girlfriend, and comedies are about the girl trying to get the boy. Like horror films are about the girl trying to survive and kicking ass. Like that's rad.
Yeah, I think every major franchise they have a strong female character that defies all the odds and ends up, as you said, being the badass and end up traditionally kind of escaping from this mass serial killer. So yeah, it's always a privilege to get to speak with people like yourself who have been in so many horror movies and to get to kind of get your personal insight into some of these movies will be really interesting actually.
Yeah. Well, I think I've been really lucky too, because I've got to play antagonist, these crazy, these crazy characters that are sort of embarrassing when I have like family friends who go, yeah, I turned on this movie and you were like raping someone with a strap on or something. But it's also like, there's nothing more empowering than being the bad guy. Especially as a woman, you kind of get to like, you show up on set and you're like, fear me, I'm about to make everyone's day crazy. And I'm sort of grateful that I got to lean into that. Like, it's really cool that when I got Wrong Turn, it kind of like everyone's like, this is her brand. She does these crazy sexed up, wild characters. And I think I started like almost playing them with like this a little bit of victim mentality, like, oh, this girl's so broken and everything. But as my life changed, I think I would show up on set with a full, like a totally different attitude, which is like making everyone very nervous. I'm like, I'm about to get in your space. I'm gonna lick your face. Things are gonna get really wild and fun. And I'm really like appreciative when I look at that.
Oh, that's awesome. So actually, it's an interesting point you bring up. So as you said, a lot of your horror movies you've been in traditionally are incredibly brutal and incredibly savage. Um, your people in your life, friends, family, loved ones, what's their traditional kind of response when you either tell them the kind of role you've been in, or if do they even watch the movies themselves?
My poor aunt, I'll say my poor aunt was like, she doesn't even like horror films. So it's like, I do understand. She's like, it's hard for her to watch a movie if, I'm getting murdered or my face is all gross or I'm murdered. Like if it's that kind of thing. Um, I mean, I'm kind of a nutball in real life. So people aren't like blown away. They're like, of course Sadie does that. Um, I have a 22-year-old and I also have a 17-month-year-old. And the 22-year-old kind of like was with me through this progression. And he's a very bohemian, artsy kid too. And I think that was a little bit hard, like when he was going to school and stuff, but we just sort of were like, am I allowed to curse on here? Do you have to bleep it out?
You can say whatever you'd like to say.
I think at a certain point with acting for me, and maybe, as I get older, I start to see this a little bit differently, but a part of me is like, you know what, fuck it, I'm playing this character. People, especially in the US, get really crazy about nudity, which is really funny when it's like basically boobs, like, because if you're in the UK, it's not a big deal at all, or most of Europe. So showing your boobs isn't the end of the world. So I think, gosh, I think people are changing their mind, but nudity is kind of out in movies right now. So it was like everything, wasn't it everything like 10 years ago? You were in a movie, you had to get nude, and now it's kind of going the other way.
Yeah, I love getting to speak with people, and you know, whether they have hard times in their careers, or whether there's some people that maybe aren't a fan of the choices in life that they make, especially with actors, especially when people, I find that a lot of people, when they tell, whether it's their parents or their guardians or whoever it may be, that they're gonna stop their day jobs and do it, they get a lot of negative feedback, and they have that in their mind of, oh shit, am I making the right decision? But I love when people hit moments where they're just, like you said, just fuck it. I'm gonna do what I want to do,
Yeah.
whatever people think they're gonna think, regardless. And you always find those people that have that mentality go on to end up being really happy and have like very successful careers.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny because I think almost people's negativity, especially like maybe different people I dated, were like very hard on me, or didn't want me to do love scenes or anything. I think the more people were like, it's an impossible thing and you're a single mom and it will never happen. like it's a weird thing in our business, you know, you with entertainment too. It's like it's the weirdest business that where people are like, if you're not Joe Rogan, then you'll never be successful. Like you, as if you have to be the number one, you know, it's funny how many times people would go, I'd be like, oh, I have this great movie coming out. And they're like, you just hang in there. One day you'll make it. And I'm like, I just told you I have a movie coming out. And they're like, well, a real movie. What are you talking? Like, it's the only profession where like it's only qualified by being, you know, Angelina Jolie. Or people will say, one day you'll get an Oscar. And I'm like, I never even put that into the it's not like that's not my quest or like my end goal to say I'm like this will make me successful. It's a very that's the more of the toxic thing is people sort of like never letting you have a win because they just don't understand how hard entertainment is and all aspects, including like, you know, podcasting.
Yeah, you know, and what's funny is even if you got to that point where you become a Angelina Jolie or a Joe Rogan, or you get if somehow you get to that point, they then turn the other way on you and they kind of feel like, oh, that person's changed. They were never like that in real life. And or they'll try and pretend that they backed you. And it's just it's mind blowing how the mind works. But yeah, I think for people like yourself and myself doing these podcasts, I do this because I just love getting to talk to people. I'm very chatty. It's a bit of a detriment sometimes. Um, but I just love the idea that people like yourself, who's been in an industry that I idolize, and I love these movies and have helped me so much growing up in my life. I get to sit down and talk to you and pick your brains about movies. I just think it's one of the most craziest things ever.
See, that's how I feel the same way that you know, there's times I'm like, oh, I wish I, you know, like, of course, everyone wants to have a huge hit so they have more opportunities to pick their projects or do more. But I genuinely like love it the same way. So I'm kind of even on projects where I'm like, I'm not sure about this project, as I'm driving to set, my heart starts to race and I start to think like I just really am like so happy to get to do like I feel like a little kid who's like, oh, I still get to show up and you know play ball. And that's really awesome. And I just, you know, even with you reaching out, I'm like, I go on your YouTube, I go, oh God, he interviewed all these cool people that I love. How lucky am I that I get to be in, you know, such good company? So it's not bullshit. Like it's, you know, it's, you can't help but say like, wow, I'm so lucky. This is cool.
That's awesome. You know, I'd really like to go into you know, I'm gonna do this a little bit differently. I kind of traditionally ask how people get into the industry, but with you, I'd really like to kind of go into some of the titles, if that's okay with you,
Sure.
and then we'll go into your life afterwards. Um, I really want to talk to you. There's a couple movies in particular. Um, one of them which I watched pretty recently, Blood Feast, which was 2016. Um, where you play the goddess Ishtar. Um, so this movie is quite singularly an incredibly brutal movie, but I really like the pairing it kind of has with the like Egyptian rituals. Um, so for you, working on a movie that has very brutal scenes in the way it does, what's that kind of like working on set?
You know what's really interesting? It's funny because you keep talking about the brutality and I'm like letting it go over my head. But I think there's something weird about like horror audiences who love like this, you know, gore porn, let's call it that for lack of a better word. um they really, I think I didn't get it at first, but after of course Wrong Turn and then doing Blood Feast and you know a couple things back to back that were like that, like the kills are ridiculous, like they're over the top. My husband actually works in true crime. He's a showrunner and director, so like he does real, like to me that stuff is way scarier. I am not a true crime person. I think when you're on set and they're like, insane. We're cutting like in Blood Feast, we're cutting this chick's butt off. And like there's all these people standing around, like, having a serious conversation. Ryan Nichols, who was our great FX guy who passed away, but like they're looking at this girl's perfect booty and they're like, how can we cut it off so it's like a clean thing? It's another kind of weird macabre art, because they'll have like chicken cutlets and all these weird things, and there's fake blood, and there is something. I'm not, obviously, look at me, I'm like, look at my background, I have like a Disney thing, like I am not like a super goth person. I know there's a lot of people in the industry who like their lives are kind of like that. I just sort of like appreciate the craziness in the kills. It's kind of silly. There's something really fun when we're like carving the body at the end of Blood Feast, and Goddess Ishtar's like standing there basically like butt naked, and I'm doing all my Ishtar-y things, and we're putting our fingers through the blood. I mean, there is something a little like a kid playing like a mud bath or something. Like, it's you're aware of it, but it's also just like really goofy, over the top. I almost feel like movies that are over the top like that aren't as hard on your soul than something that's like really close to reality. I mean, yeah, there's people who have, obviously, Jeffrey Dahmer and things, but I don't know if like these movies are really about that. Like they're much more like fantasy, like exploding people's assholes, and like it's ridiculous. It's way over the top. Um, you do wonder though, when you're in movies like that. At first, it did really scare me, because I was like, am I putting something into the universe that, like, violence, and that's what it's about? But gosh, horror fans are so kind. Like, they're kind of nerds and sweet, and they say that people who have really acute anxiety are drawn to horror films, and it's somehow that fight or flight that they're so used to in their life, they get to control that by watching a horror film, and realize that even in the darkness, like, everything's okay, they're okay after watching it. So I guess that's my way to justify doing really big movies.
No, I have to be honest, horror fans are definitely some of the biggest nerds you would ever meet. But I always find as well, especially if you do conventions, I'm sure you've done conventions, um, they're always like some of the most loyal fan base I've kind of found in general across all the franchises, despite the fact that they're like, in love with this excessively over the top gore fantasy life. Um,
They definitely, like, they'll watch everything. Like, that's the someone will come up and they'll be like, I love your movies. And I'm like, oh yeah, what's your favorite? And then they'll name like 7 films. And I'm thinking, I want to apologize. I'm like, oh, I didn't know anyone watched that film. And then they'll have like pictures from a film that, not every film when you do these things are you like super stoked about, but
of
they love
course.
them all. Like, they almost get, horror film fans almost get independent film more than the reviewers and everyone. Like, they understand, like, this is a low budget film, it was made under these things, and it's still cool because they tend to be pretty positive, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm not sure if it's an American thing as well, or if there's a version, but the UK we have I suppose it's a festival. It's called Fright Fest.
Oh yeah.
So what I love about this, and this really shows the power of the fans and the viewers watching, especially of horror, is when there's an independent movie and it gets released, and they'll air it first at these kind of festivals at Fright Fest, and just by having the sheer reaction of a random fan base, can have enough power to generate such a movement where these movies then can go on to produce sequels and get theater releases, and it can really blow up. So it's really cool that the fans are definitely getting more involved as time goes on.
Yeah, it's true. Did you see Transmission, directed by Mike Hurst? I'm in that. I play the, I haven't got to see it yet, but I know it was at Fright Fest. And you
Hmm.
know, with all the TVs,
Yeah, yeah.
and I play like the washed up actress with like the blue eyeshadow, and I'm smoking a cigarette. I don't know. And then I don't know if you remember the movie, but or remember me in the movie, but uh yeah, we got such great feedback. Like people really
Hmm.
liked from Fright Fest. And it is true. It's kind of like oh what's the clown movie?
Terrifier.
Terrifier. Like if that's a movie of like great, I'm friends with Steve Barton, so I got to kind of watch that all play out online. That's a movie of like just watching the fans kind of say, this is what we want. We're going to make this movie like multi-million-dollar theatrical, goes super viral. I'm also really good friends with Felissa Rose, and to watch every year sleepaway camp gets bigger and
It
bigger.
does.
It's not, you go to conventions now, and like a lot of the younger people are wearing costumes from sleepaway camp. Just wild. I mean, that's completely fan generated. Like that's what you hope for as a horror actor. If you do a lot of horror films, all you need is one film that the fans go, oh my god, this is amazing, and you're kind of set. Like people really love that. So, and you know, the conventions and it's there's something magical about that. It really is. Like it, the genre belongs to the fans, really.
Yeah, 100%. You know, and again, I feel like this even with yourself. Obviously, I feel in horror, I know you've done a lot of horror, but I think a lot of people would probably recognize you most from Wrong Turn 6, where you
Yeah.
played Sally. And I think that movie, is it like a 2014, if I'm not mistaken?
Yep.
So 10
Yeah.
years this year, actually. Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, because people will be familiar with your work in that movie, and they'll recognize that you were in that, they will now continue to follow the rest of your career, and they will now go out their way to watch a movie simply because you're a part of it, which is another great thing.
Yeah. Um, it's really funny because it's such a crazy movie. And I remember when I got I auditioned, I had callbacks, and it was a big deal in LA because they were looking for this lead, but uh, it was like shooting in Bulgaria, and they were like, it was an open call more or less. And I had the distinct feeling because I had multiple people call me and say, Sadie, there's this character that you could fucking nail. And I've been doing some like leads in indie films, and I did that weren't horror. And I just finished up my first horror film, House of Bad. But I'd also done a couple of like soft core for Skinamax. So they wanted, it's like sexy, whatever, silly things. And they were looking for someone who was okay with doing nudity, but also could handle carrying like this big deal. And I wanted that film like so much because, if you're not like, if you don't know anyone in the business and you come to LA to be an actor, it's like less than 4% of actors, of SAG actors, make over 40,000 a year. Like it's unbelievably difficult. And I knew if I got that film, at least I would get to work again. And, you know, um, and it's been kind of a wild ride because, obviously, like with horror films, it's going to get rated what it's going to get rated. Like people love to hate it or hate to love it, like whatever. That doesn't bother me. Sometimes if I hear a really scathing review, I kind of love it because I realize someone spent so much time. What you don't want is a review where someone goes, I don't know, it was okay, or
Yeah.
like, you would rather someone go, what is that? Like, what kind of noise is that? And I knew that Wrong Turn was kind of at least a chance for me to like say, like, this is some crazy shit that I know how to do. And it went with my look and it went with my voice. And, so I have a lot of like, I have a lot of warm feelings. I know some of the other actors, I think, were kind of like embarrassed after the movie, or they wanted to be, they were from the UK and they wanted to be like bigger names afterwards.
Hmm.
This was the first film out of theater school. And gosh, I'm just always grateful for it. I look back and I'm like, that was a great month of my life. Like, it was really magical, and there was so much about like, shooting, and there's 100 crew, and I'm in this big old palace and with these big dolly cranes, and like, God, the whole time I was just like, yes, this is the little girl in me was like, this is what it's always about. You kind of also know, like, you're not always going to get to be the star of a bigger budget movie like that, because studios dictate that. It's,
Yeah.
like, the more you know, the more you're like, you're not always going to get to be the lead in a 20th Century Fox film, especially since 20th Century Fox doesn't even exist that way anymore. So I was really aware, I think, of it being a really lovely gift. And I didn't have like a judgment. Thought it was really funny that, of course, I would play like a hillbilly who's having my brother, who's like, it's got to be like, I thought sometimes I'm like, what are you talking about? You didn't like the film. The film ends, spoiler alert, with me having sex with a melted face, half a leg with my brother while my other three brothers watch. Like, I deserve an Oscar for that. And I'm crying tears of joy. And I looked at Anthony a lot and I was like, I'm gonna cry on cue out of happiness during this scene. There was something just like super ridiculous and wonderful and crazy about that film.
Yeah, it's funny, as you said, with horror, you feel like you have, you know, the comments on people always sway from one to the other. Either it is the worst thing they've ever seen, or it's the greatest thing you'll ever watch again. And I've had this chat with actors in the past. I just feel with modern day audiences, there's just this unspoken or like unrealistic standard that they expect and want to see, that no matter what a movie produces, it's just never going to hit that. Like I'm failed to yet see a movie, to be honest, probably in the last almost 40 years, where people have said that's perfect. Some people will say it's brilliant, and then some people will say it's the worst. You very rarely hear this middle ground. Um, I really enjoyed watching Wrong Turn 6. I'll be honest, I thought it was a fun watch. It's one of those movies that it just has that repeatable watch value for me. And I think coming off, because Wrong Turn 5 won't touch too bad, but I didn't particularly care for Wrong Turn 5. Um, but number 6, I thought it's fun. It kind of says what it does, and it's as you said, it has over the top sort of funny, quirky moments, and then it has those kind of gore factors as well. I thought it was an enjoyable movie.
Woodworth did this script, and I have to tell you, so when it first came out, this is my 2 cents on this.
Yeah.
So it first comes out, and I'm like, all of a sudden I get like 4,000 followers on Facebook in one day or something. It's like, it's kind of crazy. Or no, that's when it first is like, it's gonna, like, they're making a new one. Then I got all these followers. Then when it comes out, um at first, all the IMDBs were really high. Like, the people who watched it, the general consensus was that it was really great, and it kind of redid the mythology and all this, stuff. And people were really positive. Then something happened where a couple of reviewers that were popular talked about all the sex in it, which I thought was insane, because I'm like, what are you talking about? Every wrong turn from the second, third, fourth, the fifth, like she basically is going to be raped forever. So I'm like, I didn't really understand why everyone was like, so I can't believe we're going to call this porn turn. So I thought that was a little odd because it was sort of known for that.
Mm,
And then all of a sudden, the IMDb started to change. It was like, it was cool to sort of say, this sucks. And
yeah.
then I had a lot of interviews, and people were like, yeah, we really loved it. And it was a lot of fun. And I'm like, so, well, the whole point of Wrong Turn is for the bad guys to win and that to be kind of delicious. Like some people were really upset. Like I got a lot of notes about the ending, and I'm like, yeah, but the bad guys always win on Wrong Turn.
Yeah.
Like that's the
Exactly.
whole thing. And you know what's really interesting though is then they do the Wrong Turn. They put all this money into it and do a reboot. And it's like a very woke reboot and about the right things. And no one gives a crap about that movie because Wrong Turn's not a highbrow movie. Wrong
Mm.
Turn's like a movie that you watch all of them and you're like, I'm gonna kill myself. That was so gory. Let's get, some crisp and some beers and like let's, they're not like you know what you're getting into. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of a weird thing to see that. And then the movie gets recalled. So then there's like sort of some funness and re-releasing it. And I feel like the people who come up to me are like, they're like, it's pretty good. There's like a lot of good things. The production value is probably the best of since, maybe one and two, and then three, four, and five were didn't have the same amount of uh production value, I think. Um, but it's fun. I mean, if you do a movie with this many sequels, it's kind of fun for fans they love to be like, oh my God, I have to, not another sequel, but then they'll watch it.
Exactly.
There is something kind of ridiculous about it. And um, so it's a weird franchise. It's maybe the strangest franchise other than like Leprechaun is another really weird
Yeah.
franchise, Chucky, but Wrong Turn was like below all those, like on purpose. I mean, they were shooting it in Bulgaria for years. Like, I'm a big, I'm a big person to say, like, you have to know what you have and then lean into that. Be like, this
Mm.
is what it is, and not want it to be something else. You're watching, you're watching it to be that. It's like Sharknado. Like,
Oh
how
yeah.
can you not Sharknado? It's like what you're watching. And like I'm like, let's make some popcorn and let's oh, I'm not allowed to be ridiculous. I'm sorry. Victoria,
That's
I'm
good.
sorry.
So actually, it's an interesting point. So a question I would have for you, if you personally were to let's pretend the last one that I think 2021, the last reboot one. Let's pretend that's not a thing, and we'll pretend six was the last one we've seen. What would you do to, or what would you want to see, and what would you bring back to the franchise if you were to make a Wrong Turn movie?
Oh gosh, how fun would that be? Well, I think it'd be really fun to come back with like a peg leg and a melted face. And I mean, it's always about continuing the family line, right? So maybe they need to bring in like another like a hottie because Sally is past her prime and it's over. And maybe do a fun like bad mother-in-law type angle on it, and maybe bring in another this is just off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Maybe bring in another family. So you got the Hillickers, but they have a rivalry with another family. So then you
yeah.
increase kills. Ooh, wouldn't that be fun?
There
So
you go.
it's like two cannibal families are getting married. And now, so instead of it being, you got to bring in some normies, but I do think it could be fun to like someone's getting married and now they're both out for blood. Which could be silly and a little female jealousy in there and all kinds of fun stuff. I do know that Frank had like a part 7 sort of something about, I'm not giving away something, but something about like the blue people in the Appalachian Mountains. So he had another angle on it. Uh, yeah, but I think I would be so excited. Are you kidding me? Because it's, here's something about the, oh God, what, why can't I remember the baddies? Sawtooth and, oh, I've got mom brain, insane. All of those actors were played by the same stuntmen.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, or I'm sorry. So all those actors were played by 3 stuntmen. So you had
Mhm.
the three baddie brothers, right?
Yeah.
Um, and they would alternate each movie playing each other. Yeah.
Wow, I did
In
not know
their
that.
Yeah, so I mean, from like Wrong Turn 2 on. So, and they don't speak English. So the reason why, because they're Bulgarian.
Yeah.
So the reason why you have them like and doing all the freaky little laughs is because they don't actually speak English, but they're super. Forgive me for saying this, Samuel, but they're super hot. Like you have no idea. Like Three Finger is hot. It's kind of, they stay in character. This is what's so funny. They stay in character the whole time shooting. So they always, you only see them in hair and makeup. And like one day I was looking across and like outside of a trailer, there was this really attractive man. And I was like, we've been shooting several weeks. I go, who's that guy? And everyone just started screaming and laughing. And it was Three Finger. I had been doing scenes with them over and over. So I mean, there's a lot of like love. That studio that produced the films, UFO films
Mhm.
in Bulgaria, has a lot of love towards the franchise, and a lot of the same people worked on like the makeup and stuff. I mean, it's a very it's very interesting when you're shooting something overseas, especially in like these Eastern European countries. It's you kind of have like a weird vacation. It
Mhm.
makes for a really weird working vacation. So my memories of seeing, it go from winter to spring also are connected with me like running, with a torch through the woods. It's kind of
I feel like we need to push a campaign that if they bring a new Wrong Turn, we have to get you kind of heavily involved part of the production part of it. That'd be awesome.
Oh my God, that would be so cool. You know, that would be cool. I'd be excited about that. And you know what? That's what's funny about entertainment. Like you never know, or they end up doing it and they're like, we're gonna get you really involved, and then they have me come for one day, kill me off right in the beginning, and then I don't see anymore. But you never know. Or they're like, hey, we're gonna do Sally's Revenge, and then the fans are so pissed off. They're like, why didn't we bring back Doug Bradley? And like either way, you're just kind of open to whatever the universe does. And you do have to have a thick skin, as you know, like doing these things. Like people have very strong opinions
Oh
on
yeah.
whether you are deserved to do things or not. Meanwhile, you're just at home, like waiting for the phone to call and be like, yes, sure, I don't care, I'll do it.
I just love that there's people listening that have no idea how that feeling is, but I can resonate with you how exactly that feels. Oh, it's funny. Um,
It's like the best feel, like that's the problem. We're a little bit like gamblers, because it's like I'm thinking, if you get 1,000 views on a video, that's really hard to do, especially if they're like retaining. If you get more than that, you're like, oh my God. Or if you get a great comment or whatever, you get something
mhm.
picked up, it can kind of, like, it makes you go, I'm doing it again. Like I can't
Yeah.
wait. You just get so addicted to the high of winning, and you're like, I got 5,000 views. This is freaking incredible. And was at the store and someone said it was my favorite thing ever. Yeah, it's it's a really bad addiction. It's really
Yeah,
bad. We should just take up smoking and be done with it.
for sure.
Just be like, that's so much, it's so much easier to get too.
For sure. So whilst you're on set for Wrong Turn 6, um, do you have any particular moment, whether it's while you were filming, behind the scenes, even on your way to shoot, is there a moment that really kind of sticks in your brain the most?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. Gosh, it's like funny because I do know there's like the scene with Sally that was like really been something to me where this is gonna be really funny. So Sally is masturbating in the corner. We're in this big, it's the sex altar, and it's like, marble, it's snowing. So mind you, we're in this huge old like school that was built in like, I don't know, I think 1700s in, Bulgaria. And they have all this, they're doing like my hair and makeup and everything, but it is freezing. And they have all these tarps so we don't get wet and the equipment doesn't get wet. And then Roxanne Palette is on the altar. She is going to get ripped apart by our three baddie brothers, and her limbs just altar, very very terrible, and her legs are getting split across, and and then Sally's watching and getting off on it, and then she has to tell them like stop, and get them to stop what they're doing, and she yells at them, it's not time yet to eat these people, we have things to do. And I'm actually like trying to prepare, and I'm doing my lines from Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, because I'm kind of working on the accent and also working on the fact that Sally is in heat and wants to have sex, and it's coming from this like this same kind of energy, as you do actor stuff. And then there's just a lot of people. I'm like, as a little girl, you just want to act one day where someone has one camera on you. And I'm like, wow, this scene, what's weird about it is you still don't get a lot of rehearsal. And the director doesn't speak English that well, Valeri, he's great, but and the DP, so like in some ways what you're supposed to do. And for me, I was like, I realized like all the times I've been nervous in my life, I thought, well, when they say action, it's not like I just get to go like, I don't know where I'm gonna go, boss. It's like I've got to go march over there, stop a weird, get in these characters that I know are iconic to a lot of fans, and be bigger than them, be scarier than them. And I'm in a little white like little dolly dress, and I've just been like rubbing my panties, and so I feel like there was a lot of me just like, that was a powerful moment for me, because I had to be like, well, you better believe in yourself right now, because if you back up for 1 second, if you don't jump in like completely head first, and mind you, it's like 20 degrees in there, it's freezing, um then like you have to go over, you have to start from the beginning, they say cut, everyone's disappointed. So like there is a bit of like feeling like you're jumping off of a roof, and you don't know if people are going to laugh at you if you're doing too much. I mean, if you watch my movies, you're like, I never suffer from doing too little. Sometimes I do a lot too much, but I always feel like I would rather be fully committed. It's like the Nick Cage school of acting. Like, if you stay committed, even if it's fucking over the top and really ridiculous, like at least people go, well, that bitch is crazy, but at least she stayed crazy. I don't know. But that moment was sort of big for me, just as a human being, of like just do it. And you know what? Who gives it? Anybody who says anything, like I'm doing it for like me, myself, and it was so fun. It really was. There was a lot of I could talk about it forever. It's funny. I'll go sometimes periods of not talking about it. I don't think like whatever, that was 10 years ago. And then it comes up and I'm like, that's right. That was a silly day. A lot of parties. We did a lot of partying in the evening that I instigated because these kids just got done with like they went to like a very prestigious school. I don't know, like a drama school. I don't know which schools are which, but they all
Hmm.
had just graduated. It was their first film. And besides Roxanne, who
Yeah.
I'm still friends with. But I was like, you guys better have the fucking best time of your life because you may not get this same kind of experience again. And I was a bad influence pretty much on everybody. As much like in our hotel room, I would it's like made everyone smoke and put out the fire detectors. And so it was a really nice hotel. They loved having us there. It was a lot of fun. I like it was nice. I wish we had even more video of it.
No, do you know it's funny. I know exactly what kind of there's two. I'd say two primary. I'd say really academy, well-to-do drama schools. So I kind of know they're very like prim and proper and very like I's dotted and T's crossed. And so I can imagine going there, they're like, what the hell have I got myself into?
Well, yeah, and they were like young. I follow
Yeah.
some of them. They were just out of school, and what was really funny is like for them to be just out of school, and then all of a sudden, I felt a little like maternal or sisterly towards them because obviously because they had never really been on set before, and they had been trained in theater. So
Hmm.
like film is your levels of concentration have to be even higher. You think theater is higher. The theater you get to kind of build and it keeps going and you get to have steam. Film, like you have to be at performance level immediately, and then every take you don't have the amount of takes you think, and there is a certain concept. You don't have as much freedom either. So I had done also a lot of like indie or low budget or student films. So I at least understood like, okay, you have to go in and hit a mark. But they hadn't yet learned, not all of them, but they hadn't yet learned in film how you feel that. Because in theater, you like, come on. In film, it's like you have to milk all those moments in horror films. Like, the hello, is there anyone here? That could be a long moment and give you all this screen time. And that's the weird thing. When you go to school, they don't teach you how to do horror films. Like, just which is crazy because if you're a young actor, that's the very first thing that you will book is a genre film.
Yeah, it's
Like
true.
it's completely insane. I keep saying I want to teach a genre film class because it's wild. Because if you're ever going to have like in Meisner, they talk about, you know, um, everything being life or death circumstances and in acting. Well, like that's horror films. It's all about life or death. Like, what other opportunity to put it all out there is a horror film? Like, it's an actor's kind of dream to get to do. It's so crazy.
Yeah. I'd like for the audience was to get to know a little bit more about yourself, Sadie, if that's okay. Um, so I just got a few questions. I suppose they don't have to be kind of too deep, really. They're just quick fire ones, really. So what was when you were sort of growing up, was there, whether it's a role or a genre or a movie, was there ever something about the industry that kind of inspired you?
I'm sorry, I always give the longest answers. I loved Jodie Foster as a kid, and I always wanted to be an actress. So pretty much everything inspired me. I'm a big I'm a big crybaby and passionate about everything. So I think like movies like Little Girl Down the Lane, um, and Wizard of Oz, like pretty much anything I watched, I like deeply desired to be in that movie.
Oh, awesome. Um, what would you say from the very beginning right through to today? What would you say so far has been your personal favorite part about working in the industry?
I've got really lucky and got to travel, which was really cool. Um, because that was something I always wanted more than anything. So to get to travel and then to get to make friends with like the crew that doesn't speak English. Like I've, I've been in, I've done a German, I filmed in Germany Blood Feast. I did it in Italy. I got to do a movie. Um, I did a very bad, I don't even count it as a movie in Colombia, but I still got to like be around people where like English wasn't the first language. And I sort of made friends that I feel like if I saw them, like we would be friends. And then I realized, oh my God, we barely even spoke English. Like I didn't speak their language, they didn't speak mine. So that's kind of a big surprise. I really, treasure that.
Honestly, it's quite cool to hear as well, that you've kind of done a good amount of Europe, I would say, for especially for people that don't really get to work over here often. Have you ever been to the UK or done any work in the UK or been here for conventions?
I have. I've actually been to London like maybe 6 times. And
Wow.
which is really crazy because I always go to Paris and then take the train over to London.
Yeah.
And here's what's really funny. Every time I always think like because I'm a girl, I'm supposed to like Paris the most, and I'm going to Saint Tropez and everything. And then sorry, French, all my French friends. And like this, like, God, what a bunch of assholes. Like they hate Americans for lots of reasons. And it's not entirely the friendliest of places. Then I go to London and the cab driver is happy and sweet and he's excited. And everyone you talk
Uh,
to in
we were-
London's a brilliant city. I mean, London's cleaner than Paris. It's walkable. Paris is not walkable. And there's a certain kind of I call it like the pub culture there means that you can meet anyone and they'll be like, come sit at our table, and you'll end up like ruining a day drinking way too much with a bunch of people and everyone's hugging, so I do have sort of every time I'm like, actually, London's better to visit than Paris. On, forget like the museums are really great, like in Paris and
yeah.
stuff. I don't know. London's pretty badass. Like, and you guys, I know you guys hate, some of you hate the monarchy, but like, I think it's really cool. There's something really kind of ridiculous and fun about that. So, you know, and I love Brits because you guys are so hilarious about your opinions. Like all are, it's so, what's that one bar where it's like a tree inside? Do you know, it's like this, it's so large. Anyway, I've had some of the greatest conversations there,
Oh,
with
really?
a lot of horror fans, and you guys have the best conventions, hands down. Like it's just a really fun, it's a fun place. You guys have shit weather though, just absolute like
Yeah.
Jesus. You're just like, oh my God, is it ever going to be a nice day here? Yeah.
No, yeah, that's the biggest problem. I mean, yeah, that obviously the UK and London definitely has it has negative aspects. Every place does, and weather's 100% one of the biggest problems. 100%. But one thing that I've always said to people that if you ever came to London, it's I'm quite happy you said that actually, that there is although people might look a bit scary or might come across quite intimidating, there is a really nurturing aspect to London that people will invite you if they see you're distressed, they will help you, and the convention aspects. the owners, I'm quite blessed in a way that I get to speak to a lot of owners from different conventions, different organizers, and their biggest factor for these conventions, it isn't obviously everyone wants to make money, but it's the fundamental is that the fans get a real in-person interaction with every guest, and they get to spend a bit of time, and everyone's comfortable and happy and sharing. So that's the one thing I do love about London. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think you get like, you know, LA, you don't always have very genuine interactions with people.
Hmm.
I think fans you do, but like a lot of people in the industry are really afraid that you might end up more successful than them, or I don't feel like you have that same, you know, in the UK, I feel like as a whole, it's much more like that there's room for everyone and everyone does what they do. Um, you know, I got to do a festival in Moscow, and I experienced the same thing because there was a lot of people from, you know, all over Eastern Europe and from London, and you know, and I found in Germany, like I found that people were really supportive, like in a different way. It's very hard. America is a really weird place because we're like fractured, but people think all Americans are kind of under one thing, but it's,
Mm.
you know, we're not. Americans are very different depending on what part of the country you're from. And it's particularly hard to survive in like Los Angeles in entertainment, or New York. It's so you get a lot of that kind of nervous, you know, fear of like, I'm going to have to go back home because how am I going to afford it here? So, and that changes people's attitudes, because it's, you know, it's hard to be kind when you're scared.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it's something that unless you're actually in that sort of in the belly of the beast and you're in that moment and you're living that's your life, it's very hard for people outside to visually see that, if that makes sense. You have to
Yeah,
experience it to really understand the true toughness of it.
yeah, it's true. It's true.
I'd really like to quickly talk to you as well, because something that I kind of saw while I was going through your page is you actually have a company. So the company's called is it a production company called See You Next Tuesday?
Yes, yes. And which is kind of a cheeky, I don't know. I-
I know
it's
exactly. It's British.
okay,
It's
I get
British
it.
people
When
always
other
know
people
this.
are, yeah. Um, my husband, I was like, I wish I could do a production company, like, you know, Cunt Films or something. And I said, would that be hilarious? And, you know, or something. And he goes, well, why don't you just say, see you next Tuesday? And I'm like,
There you go.
that's brilliant. Which I just wanted to be kind of ridiculous about it, and, you know, cheeky about the idea of like, you know, doing female films, but it doesn't mean that I have to be like the hero of all female. You know what I mean? Like the females don't necessarily have to be the greatest of people to tell their story. Uh, yeah, I have a film that I'm really proud of. It's also co-stars Vernon Wells and Lorraine Landon, if you know her from Maniac Cop, and you know, a lot of festival stuff. Um, it's called The Possession of Anne. When we shot it, it was called The Beast Inside, and it's a self-exorcism movie. And so I formed that company to do that, and I co-wrote the scripts and am the lead of it, and I produced it. I kind of, you know, doing all these lower budget films, sometimes you start to go like, I wish I was making these producer decisions, because I've been doing it so much. Like, you, as an actor, you're not really supposed to, you know, no one wants to hear an actor's opinions too much. Like after a while, everyone's like, make your own film. So this was my solution, was okay, I'm going to make my own film. And you know, it's not for babies, let me tell you. It's hard work. And what's hard is the distributors are kind of in charge of releasing the films. So even when you do all the things and then you deliver the film, you're still at their mercy, which
Wow.
sucks. Yeah. So that makes it a little bit tough. But it was a good learning experience. And I'm working on something else right now that I won't say yet till it gets closer, but
Yeah.
um, I don't know. I like as I'm working on this, I'm kind of begrudging. Like I'm like, oh God, I said I wasn't gonna produce another film again. And then I'm like walking into the fire, going like, just turn around, just be an actor. You don't need to be in charge of everything, you know.
You know, that's the thing. When you start a production company, it never ends at just one or two. This will now become the thing for you.
Oh God, why didn't you warn me? Well, you get really excited. Like that's how it starts. You're like, I'm gonna do this, and then we'll be doing these films. And the problem is the business is changing really fast. And I mean, who knows what it's going to be in 3 years with like AI. And
Yeah.
so as much as you're like, oh, I have control over things, you don't always have it. I'm a really great person to watch a film that's, especially an indie film, because I really do understand. I'm like, well, they probably only shot this in 3 weeks. They did a pretty good job. You understand, like it's it's not
Mhm.
easy. It's pretty tough. Like it's a weird thing. Look, I tried to do a podcast and I really enjoyed it, but getting guests who didn't cancel, are you like, I was like, dude, this is a full-time job. Like,
Mhm.
I couldn't believe how many times people would like cancel, reschedule, or they'd like, oh, their Zoom wasn't working. And yeah, I mean, any endeavor, no matter how easy you think it's going to be, is like, it's never easy.
No, but the hard work in anything you do always, I feel like, makes it more rewarding at the end, because like I've dedicated a part of my soul to doing this, and now you kind of get the rewards at the end.
This is what I tell my son all the time. I'm like, you having my older son, obviously, but I'm like, the more you lose, the harder it is, the more you're like, at the bottom of the barrel going, I should just quit. It feels so delicious when it's good. You're like, yes, I earned this. It's so great. There is something really magical about that feeling.
Absolutely. So with the production company, see you next Tuesday. Do you have right now any goals or anything you particularly want to achieve, or are you just kind of taking it kind of movie by movie and seeing where it goes from there?
I mean, I would like it if I were to put in the universe, I would love to like do one movie a year. I'd love to have like, enough money where I could have my younger baby on set. That would be really cool. Uh, it's funny because I've been doing this for a while, as you know, and I'm I'm really lucky at this stage of my life to have another baby. So I feel like right now I hustled for so long. It was like so long was like ugh, that now I'm a little bit like, you know what? I what's meant to be in the cards is meant to be in the cards. I'll keep moving forward. And I have some stuff coming up. And it's funny, it's like the more reluctant I am, where I'm like, oh, maybe we'll wait. Everyone goes, no, you got to do it. Where I feel if I was pushing the way I used to push, I think it ends up being worse. That like, the universe kind of, I hate to sound so LA, but it kind of unfolds. And if you open and walk through the doors, it's sort of meant to be. Like, I mean, you do feel like a flow. And sometimes I think you do gotta need to know like to settle down. So I mean, yeah, I would love to do a film where it makes some money, like real money, and I get to like have my pick of scripts, and that would be really awesome. But I'm a big fan of like loving where I'm sitting, you know, because I think otherwise Otherwise, you're just constantly feeling like you've been cheated.
Mhm.
You know, I feel like I'm really lucky. I get to do, I'm actually doing a DVD signing at Dark Delicacies, or Blu-ray, sorry, this Saturday for Blood Feast. Like, it's crazy that I still get to do things with that, and it's kind of fun. And maybe no one will come for me, and they'll all be there for like Robert Ressler and Carolyn Williams, and I'll just be sitting there like this, and Marcel Waltz, or maybe a couple people will be like, "Oh, I'm really excited to have you sign this." Yeah, I think either way, I'm like, I get to go, and that's a movie I'm in, and I get to celebrate that, which is cool.
Yeah, it's like you said, when you go through IMDb, like again, I've this is the first time kind of we spoke, you know, you can see how much effort and graft you've really put in over the years, and this is the first time now where you can, like you said, sit back, enjoy some family life, kind of reap some of the fruits of the work you have put in, and get to now play the field and get to pick and choose the projects that you want to do and not that you feel you have to do. And I feel you're at a point now where you like truly deserve to get to do that. So that's really great to hear.
Yeah. Even though sometimes I'm like, I should have just done that project. But sometimes I'm like, don't send me a script where you want me to show up and like be tortured all day, and then I die. And then you're like, thank you so much. I go, like, that's okay. That's for somebody else. Like, you need a really hot 25-year-old. Like, trust me, you can get that. So yeah, there is something kind of cheeky about doing that. And then also like doing more sci-fi, and going for action and going for drama.
Mhm.
I'm aging on camera, which is a gnarly thing to go through. So you have to like realize like, oh, I'm not going to always get to play these same characters. And it's a little bit of humble pie, like watching like, who's that girl? It is a weird thing,
Yeah, I
it's a lot.
can imagine.
You look at yourself a lot. You're like, wow, I have more pictures of my head than anyone that's not an actor that I know. I have whole computers filled with like thousands of headshots. Just going,
I can imagine, for sure. I feel like that's what's going to happen with these podcasts. I'm going to see myself age like milk. I'm going to just age horribly over the years, and I'm going to be like, "Oh no, I used to look okay."
you just go like you still look okay, and then your lighting gets brighter and brighter and brighter. You just keep, yeah. I mean, and it's really weird too, because we live in like this AI time where
Mm,
people like their filters. On Zoom, you could put lips and eyebrows on your Zoom. You could put a beard. Like, I don't know what. I don't like to over filter any of my pictures or any of my things, because I feel like I don't want when people see me in person for them to be like, how in the world? Like, sometimes when you run into people and you're like, you can't even, like, your brain can't figure out how they look
mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
I mean, not to be mean, but yeah, there's some people that I'm like, dude, you look nothing like you do online. You spend so much time with them online, then you see them in person, and it's like it's a weird feeling.
Absolutely. Um, Sadie, so again, if you go onto your IMDb page, like you can just see it. You've even to this day, you have so much work that's in pre-production, script, post-production. Um, I know some of them you won't be able to talk about yet. So do you have any upcoming projects right now that you are allowed to tell us about that we can kind of keep an eye out for?
Yes, so I have a werewolf noir movie that has Bronzy in it, who is kind of like this. It's sort of, I play a sheriff, a mother sheriff, which was really fun. And Bronzy is like, he looks like Charles Bronson, and he's kind of, I don't know, he has his own genre of movies that are kind of based off of this, that
Mhm.
it's I mean, I want to say it's a B movie in all its amazing glory. Like, so for fans of that genre and of like werewolves, I think that's going to be a really fun one. Um, I'm trying to think what I could talk about. Again, the possession of Anne, I'm really excited about. I can't wait for that to come out, and I hope people understand that it's like, I hope they get it and appreciate what kind of, it's like this smaller exorcism movie that I I really love. I sort of, there's a little nod to Eric England's Contracted, and sort of like that smaller story that they ended up ripping off for It Follows. But
Mhm.
like I really like that. Uh oh gosh. See, I should be looking at my own stuff. I have a movie coming out called
Do you know
the,
when you see, if people saw the list, there's so
I know.
much.
I'm like, I have a movie called The Truth About Monsters that I had a lot of fun filming. And you know, what's funny about these movies is sometimes I'm like wondering how I'm like, oh, I'm going to promote it the best I can, but I haven't seen it to know how it comes out. Transmission, I'm really excited to see what comes of that. Um, I feel like that was great. I am a really fun character in Night Carnage that's coming out through Lionsgate. That is a horror, romantic comedy kind of movie, but not really comedy. I'd say it's a horror romance. And I play Pepper, and I'm a vampire hunter. And I don't know. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So, it, like, those are the movies that I'm excited for them to come out. There's also a sleeper movie that came out, and I don't think it got enough attention. But if you're into like post-apocalyptic zombie films,
Mhm.
End Times is released, and I think that's worth a watch. And my film Megan, that is a very crazy film, just got released on Redbox. You know, these projects right now are like really interesting because of all these streamers. You can have a project that like got released 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and you still want to promote it because it goes on like Tubi or
Mhm.
somewhere
Yeah.
that you don't even, that gives other people an opportunity to see it. So it is a weird thing because I feel like I just can keep promoting films for better or for worse. People are like, can she please shut up about that film? Yeah.
So if people follow your social medias, will they be able to kind of get to keep more up to date with as some of these movies get released, or get dates, or what platforms to follow?
Yeah, I think Instagram under Sadie Katz, SADIEKATZ, is probably the best. It's where I live the most. You can follow my Facebook, but it fills up there. So sometimes
Hmm.
I look like an unfriendly person, but it's just because I have too many friends. But my Instagram, I feel like I keep it kind of updated. And I also try to like, it's also how I share with my real friends. So, you
Yeah.
know, if you're on there, you'll know it. You'll at least know a good version of my life. Like, I won't say I got really mad yesterday and spent the day crying because of my toddler, but it's kind of a fun. I like to. I have a lot of people that I follow their lives on Instagram that have been fans for a long time, and I forget that I've never met them. I'm like, why do I know so much about this chick? And I'm like, that's right. She wrote me a fan letter. Now I've been following her for years, and I don't even, yeah, social media is pretty fun, but Instagram.
Awesome. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll make sure to, at the very top of the description, that people, I'll add a link to your Instagram. I'll add your Facebook as well, just in case, but I'll do your
Sure.
Instagram,
And my
and
IMDb.
your
That's all.
IMDb. Yeah, of course. And again, being a guest of the show going forward, if you ever want us to promote any projects coming out, if we ever happen, you can always drop us an email or a message. Or if I happen to just catch you've shared something and promoted, we'll help share as well to promote for the people to, I guess, to keep updated with you, I suppose. Um, so Sadie, it has been such a privilege and an honor to get to speak to you. I have absolutely loved this conversation today.